Okay, welcome back. This should be session 4, probably. I think this is number 4. It could be number 3. I'm an English teacher, not a maths teacher. I'm recording this a bit later. I don't know how visible I am, but hello. Um, Let's begin. Active and passive voice. Really, really simple this. Really, really simple to define between the two. So, if a sentence is written using the active voice, it is, as it says there, the subject is doing the action. The subject is performing the action. It is the difference between... Well, we haven't done... Well, let's do the second one. Passive voice is the subject having something done to it, right? Done to the object. Yes, yeah. Yes. Okay. So the subject. Let me restart that. Sorry, I had a bit of a moment there. Anyway, let me rephrase. Active voice. The subject is performing the action, right? Is doing the action. Passive voice. The subject is having something done to the object, right? And so you'll often see the split in that in active voice, subject will be towards the start of the sentence. The noun phrase containing the subject will be towards the start of the sentence. Passive voice, the object will be towards the start. It's having something done to it. That's passive voice. Active voice, I am doing it. Passive voice, what I am doing it to opens it. So it could be that, oh, I ate the apple. Active voice. Passive voice, the apple was eaten by me. We can see that inversion, right? Very, 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 very simple. You have some questions here just asking you to identify which sentences are which, passive or active, asking you to change sentences into passive or active. We've got quite a few questions on these, so have a look, pause the video, and then continue on to this page. Have a look, pause the video. Scroll there for you. Have a look, pause the video, and then we come down here. This is the last bit in your introductory section here. These are grammar mistakes that don't really fit into any specific category. They're just important things to note and remember. Let's have a very quick chat about each one because they're each unique. So, I have forgot to put sugar in your tea is different. I have forgotten is correct. This is the difference when we're looking at tenses. Specifically forms of the past tense. I have forgot is the simple past because forget put in past tense, conjugated into the past tense, is forgot, right? So it does what it says on the tin. It's simple. Forget becomes like, instead of I forget in the present tense, I forgot. Simple, simply put into the past tense. This is the wrong place to use it. When you are saying that you have done something, this is the past perfect tense. So, simple past is not what we want to use. So what we want to use is the past perfect tense, which is I have something. It's when you have the past participle. Remember we spoke about past participles when you get a verb like this, and it normally has ed or en on the end of it in the case of forgot, because the past participle of forget is not forgotted, it's forgotten. The en is creates forgotten, which makes the past participle of forget. It's the main verb of the sentence. We're talking about forgetting to put sugar in the tea, and because we have forgotten it, have is used in this sentence. When have is involved, we use the past perfect. I have past participle, rest of the sentence, right? Have you walked the dog? I have walked the dog. It's not I'm using an example where the past participle I think is the same as the simple past, but know the difference, basically. Know the difference. So very simply for number 2 here, When we are using comparatives, remember, comparatives are words that, as it says, it compares two things. So we're talking about comparing the ages of the two sons. If you wanted to use the word oldest, you'd have to change the sentence because you're using a superlative because it ends in st, the oldest, the most, right? A superlative is the most of something. We've already spoken about this in a previous lesson. If you wanted to say that he was the oldest, you could say between the two sons, he was the oldest, perhaps. You're stating that he is definitively the oldest. But here we're comparing the two. The way this sentence is structured, we are comparing the two. And so you need to remember that we're using a comparative. Remember the ending. Remember the ending of a comparative is very often ER or IER. So remember to use the right ending whether you're using a superlative or comparative, otherwise your sentence will not make sense. Now, this is a very, very, very important rule that a lot of people, some very intelligent people, get wrong. When to use I and when to use me. Now, this is the rule. In fact, I don't need to do this. It says it right here. See this? I'm trying to highlight it for you. There you go. I is the subject. Me is the object. We use I. Remember when we spoke about active and passive? Think about that difference here. I, right? I use I if I'm doing something, if I'm being active with it, if I'm doing it, right? I went for a walk with him. I went for a walk with him, right? Him, because he is being taken along on a walk, is the object, right? I went for a walk with him. He is going on the walk, but it's like I'm taking him on the walk with me. I am going on a walk with him. If, it's still quite dark, let me turn that on. Does that help a bit? There you go. If we are saying that it has to be the way around, he is going on a walk with me. Suddenly I'm the object because he's taking me on the walk, right? He is going on a walk with me. He's taking me along, not the other way around. I'm more passive in that sentence. I'm the object. I'm being carried along. I'm not the one making the decision. I'm being dragged along on the walk, not the other way around, right? So we need to remember the difference between whether I am doing the action or an action is being done to me, right? This is why when we are saying, the people who went along to the gig or the show, the play, the performance were Jessica, Stephen, Andrew, and I versus Jessica, Stephen, Andrew, and me. You need to know which one of those is correct and which one of those isn't. You need to think about these sentences. Are you the subject or are you the object? Right. How much more have we got to look at today? We'll get through it. We will get through it. So, who? Now this is similar again. Similar to the previous one, number 4. Who is a subjective form. It's the subject. Who is doing this? Not a question. Who? Imagine someone's name is Who. Who is doing that? They are actively doing it. You want to know who. What are they doing? Who is doing this? Right? If we are using it in an objective way, as an object, we are using the word whom because something is being done to them. Again, right? Look at this example. Who do you believe? Right? Who do you believe? Who do you? Who? It's a subject. Which of these people do you believe? Whom do you believe is the correct answer, though. Whom is wrong? Who is wrong? Because who is not. It can't be the subject. It's you. You are the subject because it's asking you. Who do you believe? Whom? Us. Who you're being asked to consider out of us. Who do you believe? We are the objects. We're not believing. It's up to you to believe one of us. Right? We are being believed by you. It's not that we're believing. You are believing us. So we are whom? Whom do you believe? It's about object. Right? We are the objects here. Whom? So use whom when it's an object. When you're using it in the sense of an object, not the subject. Now remember, when you're doing neither nor, Neither needs to be paired with nor, because that is the negative partnership. Neither has to go with nor. If you're doing positives, you're not negating anything, either or. Simple change. Simple difference, remember that. Now, double negatives. Double negatives do not work. If I come up with my own example here. No one tells me nothing. I'll write this one down for you so you can see it. No one tells me nothing. No one tells me nothing. Think about what that sentence is actually saying. No one tells me nothing. So that means some people must tell me, what, something, everything? You see how it means completely the opposite of what we're trying to say, which is, no one tells me anything. Out of everyone, no one has told me a single bit of information. No one tells me anything, right? When you have a double negative, they cancel each other out and they end up meaning the opposite. I'll write that round. What they do, double negatives cancel out and mean the opposite as a result. So when we say, I can't find my keys nowhere, what we're actually saying, what that sentence actually means is, I can find my keys somewhere. I can't find my keys nowhere, or I can probably find them somewhere. You see? Double negative cancels out, and what we're saying is what we don't actually want to say. So avoid a double negative. Right, this is a very simple one, number 7. Just make sure your plural verbs align with plural nouns. Okay, there is biscuits on the table. There are biscuits on the table. Remember, we spoke about a word, conjugations. Conjugations. I'll write it again. Conjugate the verb properly. Here, the verb is to be. I am, you are, he, she, it is. If it is singular, it's going to be is, right? If it's a thing, is. If it's a plural noun, biscuits, multiple biscuits, well, we know how to conjugate. Like, what would you call the biscuits? Those biscuits, them biscuits. And we know to conjugate that into be is are. We know that. So make sure you're using the right verb with the right kind of noun. The word done is always going to pair with conjugations of the verb to have. Done always goes with it, otherwise it doesn't make sense. They done it again. They done it again. It's incorrect grammar. They have did it again. Incorrect grammar. Has to be done. When you have the verb have involved, done has to be used. Did doesn't need have. They did it again. You can get rid of the have in that first part of example 8 there. You don't need it. They did it again. Did does not need have. Done does need have. So, right, this is a very, very, very common error. It is never could of, or would of, or should of. I believe that this is probably an error made because when we contract it to make could have, or should have, or would have, if you say that to yourself, let's do this, should have, as an example, it sounds more like should of than should have. It doesn't have that open A sound. It has more of that that O noise. Should of, should have, should of, should have. You see how they sound similar? I believe that's why people mistake it to be, here in this instance, Harry would have made a good teacher. But again, that's wrong. Of it's not even a verb. We need to have there. We need to have because that is a verb. We need a verb in that sentence. Of isn't a verb. The sentence doesn't make sense. He would have made a good teacher. We're using to have, again, one of the most important verbs in the English language. So, right, who, the difference between who and which. We've already spoken about who and whom. We're talking about who and which now for this last example in this bit. Who goes with people, right? Persons goes with people. Which, anything else. It's anything else. However, what this doesn't say here, and I'll say it to you now, you might want to use who with animals if you believe that animals are people. That's one point to make. And another point to make is if animals are characters in a story or a fable or a film, anything like this, you may hear the word who in reference to animals. There is a very famous children's book that I loved when I was growing up, and I could read it right now. That's how good it is. The tiger who came to tea. Because in this story, the tiger is a living character. He is involved in the narrative. So therefore, he is the tiger who came to tea. It's it's almost as if he's a person. He is anthropomorphized. Anthropomorphized. Is he anthropomorphized? No, he's personified. Excuse me. If you didn't know what the word anthropomorphized meant, you probably heard that and got a bit scared. I'm not going to define that for you, but he's personified. He's made human in that story, and so it makes sense to use who with the tiger. Okay, so that's your first section done. We're on to second section. Even I'm doing better than I thought I was. I hope you are too. We're going to look at punctuation now. I've got a couple of pages of notes. Let's talk about them. This is a very simple introduction. Have a read of that. I don't really need to explain anything there, but one thing I will talk about is, and one thing that this page touches upon, is pacing. Pacing. Pace of speech. When you are reading a piece of writing, you should be able to read it as if it is being spoken to you. You can hear a voice saying it inside your brain. Pacing aids, and it's a word I've used before, it's crucial in English, crucial in creative writing, coherency. Punctuation will not only make pacing better, but that pacing and that punctuation will improve your coherency, will improve the way in which you're writing, any piece of writing or reading makes sense. That's what punctuation does. You've probably read sentences that you've written before where you sort of just go, if you find yourself reading a sentence and running out of breath, it really should be broken up with some punctuation. You need a comma in there. Otherwise you're reading just going, whoa, the words are blurring into each other, the sentence doesn't make sense. It's not coherent. It's not paced properly. I need a space to breathe, to pause, right? Really important. One of the main purposes of having punctuation at all. So, let's look at our capital letters and full stops. So, capital letters at the starts of sentences, first person pronoun of I always has to be capitalized, and proper nouns. You get a list of kinds of proper nouns there. It's something we've spoken about before, your people, places, languages, nationalities, months, titles of things. And then full stops, of course, show that sentences have ended. Two very simple rules there. They should be simple, which means that you should find these sentences nice and easy. Which words should have capital letters? Which sentences are properly punctuated? Pause this one here, have a look through these. And then when you have done that, come with me. Let's have a look at these ones as well. Pause the video here, have a go at these questions. You might be asked to find some incorrect uses of punctuation. And then just a few more here. Having a look at these, pause the video. We will do the answers at the end. Okay, I believe this might be the last thing we look at today. I think it is. Okay, so, commas. Commas. So the first purpose of a comma, we've already spoken about it, pauses and pacing and places to take a breath. If you're reading a sentence, you should be able to hear where a comma can go. If you're reading it and you're going, oh, actually no, the rhythm of that, the pace of that is all wrong. I need to take a pause, I need to take it in, I need to take a breath. There should probably be a comma or some other punctuation in that space. So, listing, they separate items in a list. You have something, and then something, and then something. Here you go. Hobbies include listening to music, playing football, going on a run, reading books, and watching television. All of those need to be separated by a comma, otherwise you just have words and words and words and words without a verb. You notice that. The comma saves you from having multiple words next to each other with no verb. Otherwise, if you didn't have a comma there, what you'd have was to include listening, and then you'd have this many words without a verb. To music, playing football, and watching television. 7 words without a verb. Very long time to not have one. That sentence will start to make no sense. So those commas help you out there. This is just something that you may be interested to know. A list that has commas is referred to as being asyndetic, versus a list where there aren't commas but there's just the word and repeated over again. My hobbies include listening to music and playing football and watching television. We call this syndetic. Syndetic, let's do this, syndetic and asyndetic, commas. I'll move that over for you, don't worry. There you go. That's the difference between your two kinds of lists. Okay. Now there is something to note here. You see in the brackets here it says but not before and. In the example you don't have one here. Playing football and watching television. Now this, I'm going to be unbiased. I'm going to sit on the fence and I'm going to say you can decide. This is actually a huge debate whether or not when you are doing lists there should be a comma before the and that comes before the final thing in the list, i.e. Watching television is the final thing in the list, the and comes before it. There would be a huge debate on whether there should be a comma after football and before and or not. You decide whether to use it. Personally, if you were to ask me if it's right or wrong, it doesn't bother me that much. I probably do a 50-50 split myself. Another thing that commas can do when we are doing these lists is that it can eliminate confusion. It can specify who is what in a list. The example I've got here is, so let me do this here. So, I spoke to the boys, Sam and Tom. Now, is it that you spoke to the boys, Sam, and Tom, three different groups, the boys, Sam, and Tom, three things, or did you speak to the boys, plus Sam and Tom, two groups, or did you speak to the boys, who are Sam and Tom? You have three different options here, right? Now, if you were to add a comma, one more comma, you would actually, before the and, controversially, you would eliminate confusion. If you were to put a comma just in there, it's now a bit more obvious that what you're talking about is I spoke to the boys, Sam, and Tom. Three options. You see how that makes sense? Because we've added another pause in there. It implies that you've changed. You're onto a different thing. I spoke to the boys, pause. Sam, a second thing, pause. And Tom, additionally. Three things. It implies that there are three things. Especially because if Sam and Tom are separate, Sam cannot be the boys on his own, because Sam is a singular proper noun and the boys is a plural. Yeah? Sam cannot be more than one boy. So, separation of clauses. Separation of clauses. Now, these are all quite straightforward. Which one shall we talk about? Phrases that give extra information. You see this one here? This second one. Max, my best friend. You see how on either side of this, Max, comma, my best friend, comma, is 8 years old. If you were to delete my best friend, Max is 8 years old, that sentence still makes sense, but you nest this additional information in the middle. And when you want to do that, you want to give more information in the middle of a clause, you do so by putting a comma either side of it. You take the pauses, it's coherent, it makes sense. You can also separate an independent and dependent clause. Here it's referred to as a subordinate clause. We've spoken about independent and dependent clauses before. Independent clauses are clauses that can exist on their own. Dependent clauses need an independent clause to make sense. So let's have a look at this. The school's best player. This is a dependent clause. That as its own sentence doesn't make sense. There is no verb. It can't be its own sentence. The school's best player, full stop. Doesn't make sense. School's best player, Paul Dent, stepped onto the pitch. You see how that makes sense now? This, if you take this one on its own, Paul Dent stepped onto the pitch, struggling. Right, imagine I've highlighted that. Being difficult. There you go. Paul Dent stepped onto the pitch. That sentence on its own makes sense. As a clause on its own, it can be a full sentence. It makes sense. That is an independent clause. The bit before it, the school's best player, is an is a dependent clause. It needs the information about him stepping onto the pitch to make sense. You separate those two with a comma. Alternatively, you can conjoin two independent clauses together, right, with a coordinating conjunction. We spoke about them, you remember fanboys? But, for instance, Paul Dent stepped onto the pitch, but he got badly injured. Something like that. Paul Dent stepped onto the pitch, but he got badly injured. The things either side of the word but, Paul Dent stepped onto the pitch, independent clause can work on its own. He got injured. He got badly injured. Has a verb, has everything you need, can work on its own, independent clause, right? But if you want to conjoin them into one sentence, you put a coordinating conjunction between them, such as but. And you need to separate them by a comma before the conjunction. Paul Dent stepped onto the pitch, comma, but he got badly injured. We see the difference? I hope we see the difference. I don't know why I was expecting a response. I'm here, you're not. So, this works for all examples but one. If the second independent clause is very short, you may not need a comma, right? And you often get this in, you remember this, right? Imperative sentences. Imperative sentences. Sit down, and it's quite a rude one, I'm sorry. I'm not saying it to you. Sit down and shut up. Sit down and shut up. You don't need a comma in that sentence because it's very short. Sit down and shut up. There's no pacing issue. It's coherent as it is. It's an order. It's an imperative sentence, right? It's telling you to do something. It's a demand. Sit down and shut up. You don't need a comma there. It's fine. Let's have a look at this bottom point here. Certain adverbs need a comma to follow them, right? Tomorrow, I will consider giving you an answer. The adverb in question is the word tomorrow. Tomorrow, comma, I will consider giving you an answer. You see how tomorrow, this opening adverb at the start of the sentence, needs a comma behind it for the sentence to read properly, to be paced well, to be coherent, to make sense. It needs the comma. You take the breath. Tomorrow, what you want to do tomorrow, I will consider giving you an answer. If the word tomorrow, or an alternative to these kind of adverbs, words like therefore, furthermore, still, however, we normally put a comma either side of them if they're in the middle of a sentence. So let's say, does this sentence work? Yeah, it does. So, if we do this one. Look at that sentence. However, it's the same kind of word in this sentence as tomorrow is in this one. They work as adverbs, right? They talk about giving the answer, or it will come. It will come. However, it will come. It will come. However, tomorrow. You see how that works? If we put it in the middle and it sort of conjoins these two clauses together again, it's similar to what we've spoken about before with this nested information. You need a comma before and after for it to make sense, if you want to put one right in the middle. And these are adverbs that you might normally find when you're trying to write to persuade or writing essays. However, furthermore, still, therefore, words like this. Yeah. Right, last but not least, if you're writing a sentence that has one adjective after another, you want to say the big fat cat, the big fat cat, the big fat cat. You separate the words big and fat with a comma. The big fat cat. It just makes more sense. Again, it's about pacing. The big fat cat. It's too much in one go, especially if the sentence is going to continue on for some time. Take the opportunity to take the breath there. Adjectives do not roll into each other necessarily. You take the pause because it's another kind of list. You're listing description about this cat. No offence, to how big and fat this cat is. And the last point I want to make is that it precedes, P-R-E-C-E-D-E-S, comes before the start of a quotation or a bit of speech. If you're going to say that someone said something, Mary said, comma, open your speech mark and go for there. The comma has to come first before you say what she said, before you quote her. Good. Okay, so we've got some questions on commas here. Just 3 options at the bottom. Okay. So sentences, you've got to figure out whether the commas are used correctly, which sentences use a correct comma, what is the purpose of commas, identify where commas should go, so on and so forth. Pause the video here, have a go at these questions, and then when you've done that, have a go at just these few more. Which sentences use a comma correctly? And then once you've done that, we'll look at the answers for this session. I've gone too far. Be around here. The awaited, baited loading of the answers. Here we go. So, articles and interjections we've done. Subject. We're getting through this, folks. Right, there you go. Commas. Okay. So, starting from here are your answers. This is the rest. Pause it. Check you've got the right ones. I hope you have. I hope this has been helpful. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.